Good morning. My name is Eli. Can you please tell me your name?
Hello, my name is Chalita Mew. You can just call me Mew.
Okay, now, Mute, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about where you live. Have you always lived in the same town or city?
Actually, no. I'm from Thailand, but I also used to live in Japan during my university years.
Hmm. And what do you like about the city that you currently live in?
I really like the city area, and actually, I'm living in the city area. My house is in the middle of the city, the capital city of Thailand, which is Bangkok. And the reason I like my hometown is because I've been here since I was born, so I really love this place. And also because it's very close and close to the department stores as well as train station.
Would you like to always live in this city?
Yes, I'm kind of like a city person. So actually, I've also been to Japan as I maybe I did I mention before, but I've
Briefly.
actually been to Japan too, and I lived in the countryside of Japan, so I've been to both the countryside and the city side, but I still prefer the city side because I don't know how to drive, so it's more convenient to be in the city where there's a lot of transportation, public transportation.
Let's move on. Let's talk about jewelry. Do you like to wear jewelry?
Yes, I do. I'm actually wearing one right now as well, and I prefer both necklace and the earrings.
What type of jewelry do you think look nice?
Mm, I'd say necklace because when we go out and it's the first thing people will notice because from with earrings if you have long hair like me sometimes it's hidden underneath so you wouldn't really see it, and with the hand you can kind of see it as well, but from far away the first thing people would see is the necklace.
Hmm. Have you ever bought jewelry for someone else?
Yes, I bought like rings for my sister because she really likes jewelry as well. So when I go out and I see like pretty jewelry, sometimes I would buy it for her and just like send her pictures.
Why do you think some people spend a lot of money on jewelry?
I think it's partly because of their hobby. So some people like to collect jewelry, and most people, when they get jewelry, they feel that it's like something that when they wear, they have confidence with it. And sometimes if they don't have these jewelry with them, they might feel that they're lacking something or something's like missing. So it's kind of a way to show their confidence.
Hmm. Let's move on. Let's talk about singers. Do you have a favorite singer?
Yes, I do. I have a favorite singer, but my favorite singer is not Thai or like someone who speaks English. He's a Korean singer.
Okay. Have you ever been to a live concert to see a singer?
Yes, I've been to live concerts before, and for a singer, I think I haven't been to any singer's concert, but as like a group of bands or like something like that, I've been to those kind of bands concert before.
Are singers from other countries popular in your country?
Yes, especially of course the uh like very like pop stars like Ed Sheeran or um all those very high what's that word, like the people that's at the top of like the singing industry, the music industry. So I'm running out of names right now, but um Taylor Swift is actually very popular in my country as well.
Would you like to be a famous singer?
I would say no because I actually don't really like to be in the spotlight sometimes because when I'm in front of like a crowd and an audience, I get very nervous and sometimes I speak faster or I tend to like don't know what to speak anymore. And I think if I become a singer, then maybe my voice wouldn't come out at all.
Hmm. Okay, now in this next part, I'm going to give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make some notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, here's your topic. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, you'll have 1 minute to prepare. Right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
So recently I haven't been reading books that much, but I remember a book that I really love, and it's actually a Japanese book. And I read the translated version of this book. The name, I'm not sure of the English title, but um, from Thai's translation to English, I would say it's called Mamiya's Door. And Mamiyas is a person's name. And with the writer, this is kind of challenging because I actually forgot the writer's name. So I would skip that part. And I've got recommendations from my friends to read this book. And also, when I went to the bookstore, it was at the top seller part of the store. So I was like, maybe this book would be interesting to read. So I bought it and I read it. It's quite thick. It's around like 400 to 500 thick words, not words, I mean pages, but it's quite thick actually. And the book is about, it's a fiction book and it's a book about like a story of a Japanese store. And the setting is in like currently, like now, the setting is in this present time. So there's this three thieves and they were out trying to hide from like the police and they ran into this empty house with no one inside, I think. And then they went in there and then suddenly while they were like exploring the house they heard a noise and they walked towards the noise and they found like a letter at like inside like a box of milk. And they read the letter and somehow that letter is like from the past. And the letter is from the past, but they ask a question from the person's house,
No?
like the mummy asked.
Very intriguing, but I'm going to have to stop you because we just run out of
Okay.
time. Would you recommend this book to other people?
Yes, because I think the book itself is really interesting from the beginning. And as you read, you will find that there's a lot of like hidden like clues inside. And it's kind of like a mystery kind of book. And also once you finish the book, you feel that you actually learned some kind of lesson through this book.
Thank you. Okay, so we've been discussing a book that you read, and I'd like to discuss with you some more general questions related to reading. So this book was a fiction book. Why do you think many people enjoy reading fiction books?
I think because one, because people nowadays are very busy with like their own life and they get a lot of stress, maybe through working or learning. So fiction is one of a way to help them get away from their own life, like their real life. And so when they read fiction books, they feel that they're part of another world and they can fantasize anything. So that creates like a space for them to relax.
Hmm. So some people choose to read books, other people prefer to watch television. But there's a criticism that people that watch television are considered slightly more lazy, and people who read books in their spare time are seen as more dynamic and productive. What do you think about that?
I think I would agree and disagree with this. So myself comparing to my sister, we are quite different, and I'm more of like a television person compared to my sister, who's more of like a book person. And she reads a lot, and she it does look like really productive, but in the end I just feel like we're using the time for our own like kind of hobby, or like it's kind of the same whether you're reading a book or watching a television. You can still both learn something from these two. For example, books, of course you would get like vocabularies, and when you practice reading a lot you would get some more confidence when you see words that you don't know, and you can actually learn a lot from that. But from television you can also learn through the listening part.
Hmm. But don't you think that maybe books help us to develop our imagination more than, say, television?
Mm, this part I think I would agree, because for television the visuals are there, so there's not much for you to imagine or like try to create another impression of the same thing, that like the visual is right there. But for the book, when you read you have to try to imagine your own thing, and it sometimes creates opportunity for you to like think of uh what kind of things is possible. Like there's not one answer if you're reading a sentence.
Nowadays, books are being changed a lot because of the invention or the creation of ebook readers. Do you think that's a good thing?
um I would say both have like their own advantages, and I would not say one is better than the other, because for me I actually like reading paperback books more than ebooks, because ebooks are like sometimes when I read for a long time my eyes get hurt, and also like sometimes it's so small. It's okay during the daytime, but at night my eyes get really tired from like the whole, maybe like the whole work or study. So when seeing ebook it's kind of like tiring already, so I ended up reading less than compared to the book version, like the paperback version. But one good thing about the ebook is that of course it saves the environment with less paper. And also one thing I really love about ebook is that it's like very cheap compared to the book.
That's definitely true. Let's move on. Let's talk about the power of books. Why do you think some books throughout history have been banned by the government?
I would say it's this is quite a tricky question, and for me I think it's partly because of propaganda, as well as how the government sees the situation. And mostly I think it's all about propaganda. They don't want the people in the country to know the truth, or maybe they want to hide something from the people, so that's why some books are banned.
Do you think it's right for a government to be able to ban certain books that they don't like the message of?
um i think I think they don't really have the right to, but at the same time I also feel it's not wrong to ban something, because sometimes if they don't ban something, um like political issues or something like that, people might have like people that have like strong heads might actually go violence, like use violence to try to like get their way into something that they think it's correct or right. So sometimes I feel that sometimes like government should really control something like these kind of stuff.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the speaking test. So, how did you find it, Mew?
It was quite challenging for the part two, because I haven't been reading books that much and I ran out of like titles for the books names.
Oh, but I love that. I loved that. I loved your part too. I thought it was very clever that you said, "Well, I don't read very often, but this is a book that I read a long time ago. I can't remember the name. I can't remember the authors, who the writer is." But then you went on to explain anyway. I thought that was a brilliant part.
I'm
And
actually quite bad when talk about the summary of books because I ended up wanting to talk about the whole story instead of like the summary itself. And
yeah,
I tend to need longer time to like explain about summaries.
and I wanted to listen. I was kind of getting drawn into the story of the sound coming from the milk carton. Crazy. Uh,
Really interesting, the book.
yeah. If you do remember the name, just send it to me in an email. I'll check out that book.
Okay, sure.
And so you've done the IELTS speaking test before. What score did you get?
I got an 8.0.
Right, right. Okay. And in the speaking part.
I think it's an 8.
Right.
Not sure.
Right. Was it quite a long time ago?
Um, I think it's around last year,
Mm,
but maybe September or October, I'm not sure.
okay. Right. So, I mean, I could, very, very impressive English. I would
Thank
also
you.
be giving you a band 8, but you're really close to band 9. And I think for pronunciation, you're band 9. You've got
Oh, thank you.
a very clear American kind of sounding accent. I, I presume that that's come from your upbringing. Is that right?
I think it's kind of difficult because my accent is kind of a mix because I watch a lot of American movies when I was young, like Disney movies, Disney animations. But in school, my teachers are mostly British back then,
Mm.
but I didn't pick up their accent.
Right. That probably means you felt more of a connection with television than you did with your teachers.
Maybe. And maybe because I end up just like if I speak, it doesn't really show that much, but when I type or write, the British part really comes out. Like I use color with a U, not like an OR, or like,
Right.
meter with an TRE, not the ER.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So your accent is leaning towards more United States, and your writing style is leaning towards more United Kingdom.
Yes.
Interesting. So, so my score for you would be 8889. So, so the first criteria that you're assessed on is fluency and coherence, and you'd be getting 8 and very close to band 9 for fluency and coherence. Just some repetition stopped you from getting band 9, and this is really minor repetition. Um, and then also slight hesitation just in the last 2 questions in part 3 when I was really pushing you with difficult questions. So that would just stop you
Okay.
from getting band 9, but you're so close. Um,
Thank you.
and then after fluency and coherence, we have lexical resource, which is vocabulary. And again, so close to band 9, just a couple of small mistakes that stop you from getting that band 9. Because again, band 9 is that kind of perfect score that everybody's looking for. And in fact, most native speakers end up with a band 7.5. So you're doing better than
Really?
most. Yeah, it's true. People who write down that
Wow.
English is their first language on average score 7.5 in the speaking test. So you're a
Wow.
whole band score higher than that.
Wow.
Um,
That's crazy.
yeah, and they get the same with grammatical range and accuracy, which is your grammar. You're very close to band 9, but a few little mistakes stop you from getting band 9. So in part 1, um, I noticed you said the countryside and the city side. We don't really say city side. We just say the city and the countryside. So that small little
Oh,
difference. You also talked about one jewelry, but with jewelry we tend to say like one piece of jewelry. We don't really have one and then jewelry. Um, but I loved, your ability to paraphrase as well. So I asked you about, have you ever been to a concert? And immediately you talked about a live concert. So you were able to take my idea and then paraphrase the important parts of that question. And my guess is you're not even thinking that you're doing this, but it's the
Yes.
kind of thing that the examiner picks up on. They go, "Ooh, this person's got a very high level of English." So that was great. And then I also really liked, you got a little bit confused trying to work out. I think maybe the word you wanted was top of the charts, so or top of
Yes.
the billboard. So people like
I
Taylor
was
Swift.
trying to get that word, but it just didn't come out.
Yeah. But you paraphrased it very well. I think you said top of the singing industry, which makes a lot of sense. And when you find yourself not finding that word, the examiner likes to listen in to see how you cope with finding that word. And you did very well. You said, okay, I don't know the word charts or billboard. I'm going to use singing industry as well, which communicates the idea very well, even if it's not the perfect word. So actually, that was a strong point for you. And I also loved, that you used so many um, nice words like in the spotlight, or even you said, "Oh, I'm running out of words." So running out is a phrasal verb. Very nice. In part one, there was a slight confusion when I was asking you, would you like to always live in this city? And I think you heard the city, but that's just a small mistake with listening, and especially because we're doing this over Zoom, so that you won't lose any marks for that. Part two was wonderful. I really liked part two. I thought you had a very nice, relaxed intro where you said, I don't read so regularly and I haven't read anything recently, but there is this book that I read a while ago. I read it in Japanese. I forgot the writer's name, I forgot the title, but let me tell you a bit about the story. And that was wonderful because it was very real. It wasn't something memorized and this is the book that I'm going to talk about. And you've rehearsed how you're going to talk about Harry Potter 100 times. It was a very real rendition of a book that you remember slightly, but not perfectly. And I think it was very clever that you started telling the story of the book and summarizing it. Because often when we're telling a story, we use a lot of different vocabulary and grammar tenses as well, and it makes it more engaging for the listener, so the examiner, which I really really like. So in part two, good idea to tell a story.
Thank
And you
you.
said, I think you said box of milk. We'd usually say,
Yeah, I
we'd probably usually say
couldn't think
carton
of
of
the
milk.
word.
Yeah,
Um,
carton of
it's
milk.
actually like it's difficult to explain because I'm kind of trying to think of the right word in English. It's um like before, like many years ago, people would drop milk in like a box, a mailbox or something like that. Do
Right.
you know
Oh
what I'm
yeah.
trying to say? But I don't really know what it's called in English. So I'm
Right.
trying to figure out like the word for it.
Yeah. A
And then
bot.
I didn't think of anything.
Could it be a bottle of milk? You mean the kind of when people?
Um, so I'm not sure about if they have this in like the Western countries or like the other country, but for Asian countries, we would have like a place where in the morning people we pay like a subscription for the milk, and they would just put these milk inside like the mailbox every morning.
Yeah, we call that
But
the
I'm
the
not sure.
milkman.
Yeah, oh, milkman. But
Yeah.
what about like the box
Right.
themselves?
Okay. Oh, I see. So it's not the milk itself. It's the kind of
Yes,
the
it's the
container for the
box.
milk.
Yes.
Right. Well, I'd probably just say that the milk container. But I see what you mean.
Oh,
It's
okay.
quite difficult to differentiate the actual the container and the or the carton, and then the box that it comes in.
Yes.
So
And I
right.
thought like we don't have that much time to explain this
Yeah.
whole
Right. So
thing. So
actually,
I just kind of like got that word.
Yeah, so actually it was correct then in the context that you used it, because I don't know the story, so I presumed it was inside the milk, which is very
Oh,
strange. But it was in the box. And then
yes.
in part three, just moving on again, I really, really liked part three. I liked all this kind of I would agree and disagree, and then you elaborated on why, to an extent, you agree, and also to another extent, you disagree. So that was really good, and it shows critical thinking and being able to talk about both sides of an argument, which is great. I also
Thank
liked
you.
all these little informal phrases like, my sister is a book person. So, like, to be a book person, it's kind of quite cool language to use. Um, you said a small mistake watching a television. When we talk about television, we always say watching the television. And then another one is you talked about vocabularies, but vocabulary is uncountable. So we just say lots of vocabulary.
Right.
Yeah, we wouldn't pluralize it. But that was one of the most impressive speaking tests I've ever done. So
Thank you.
congratulations. That was absolutely
Thank
brilliant.
you.
And I was wondering if I could ask you a bit more about your experience learning English.
Sure.
So, did you start learning when you were very young?
Yes, I studied in an international school since year one. So I've been exposed to English when I was really young. So I just kind of picked up those grammar or vocabulary from back then.
Right. And so, how old are you in year one in Thailand?
Oh, year one, maybe around 5 to 6 years old.
Right. And so, from 5 or 6 years old, you've been taught exclusively in English by your teachers.
Yes.
Right.
All my lessons were in English, like science, mathematics, or art, all classes except Thai class.
Right. So, do you find that actually your English is almost as good as your Thai?
I think so.
Right. Do you find that
My
there's
Thai is actually, oh, sorry.
do you find that there's certain topics that you find easier to talk about in English than in Thai?
I'd say something quite like something related to education or like math or science or these kind of um educational topics. I would maybe prefer English more than Thai because I actually don't know some words in Thai.
Mm, right. And what about your peers? Did you guys talk in English or in Thai together?
Um, we secretly talk in Thai together, and when we're when we don't see any teachers around us, we speak in Thai. But as soon as we found like a teacher nearby, we would switch to English right away.
And that's because of the rules in your school.
Yes, yes. So our school, and also I've been to like two international schools in my life, and both schools had the same rule of not being able to speak in other language aside from English, which is kind of a good thing because now that I'm thinking about it, I get a lot from that rule. But back then, I didn't really like it.
It's kind of troublesome at the time, and then years
Yes,
later, you think to yourself, "That was the best decision they could have made."
yes,
It kind of reminds me of like when you're growing up and your parents are always asking you to play a musical instrument, and at the time you never want to, and then when you grow older, you're so happy that you can play the piano or the violin well.
yes, exactly.
And do you speak any other languages?
I do. I speak Japanese and Korean,
Right,
and I'm trying to learn Chinese now.
right. So, can you tell us a bit about learning Japanese?
I've actually been in Japan for 4 years before I came back to my country, and I went there for my university. So I studied design, and all my classes were conducted in Japanese.
Right, okay. So, you must have already had a good level of Japanese to get into the university in the first place.
I actually really enjoy learning Japanese back in middle school. So I took like Japanese class outside of school, like cram school, every Saturday, like 2 hours a week. And after that, I had like an intense course of like 8 months course for Japanese before I enter university, and around like 4 months in Japan learning the Japanese language.
Wow. And did you feel that in that time you got to a high enough level of Japanese that you could study well in the university?
At first, not really, because I actually planned to be in Japan for a year before I enter university. But during the interview for like different classes, we had to like take a test to see what class we were in. And during that test, we had like an interview as well. And back then, somehow like the professors there told me like, do you want to be in university next term? And I was like, I can, or like, is my level all right already? And they told me yes. So I just like went for it.
Wow. Wow. So you actually went a year early. You planned to give yourself one more year of studying. And then in the interview,
Yes.
they said, hey, your Japanese is great. Let's start.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Wow.
I still didn't really believe my ears back then because I was like, I just came to Japan and like, I'm ready for like a year of learning. And then suddenly they were like, you can just go and study right away. But
Wow.
it was quite challenging. In fact, like the classes, like my first year of university was quite challenging, or more of like the first semester of the year was difficult because I couldn't really adjust to the environment. Like all my classmates are Japanese, except like two people who are like foreigners.
Mm.
So like it was kind of challenging to be in like a real Japanese environment with like real friends and classmates and like the teacher teaching everything in Japanese. The level was very different from when I studied the language. So I had like quite a hard time back then.
Yeah. Do you think in hindsight you would have preferred to have an extra year to prepare?
Actually, I would say no because I feel that I can still like I got a lot from university itself. So even if I didn't study the language that well or didn't have another year, but in class we'd still have to use it frequently. So we still have to learn everything again because especially with the vocabulary they use in the major, like design or art vocabularies are quite different from when you study the language. We don't really learn those like specific words. So I feel like it's okay even if you just enter the university right away if you're ready.
Right. Because that's almost the situation that a lot of my viewers have, and a lot of the members of English Pro Tips have. They're doing their IELTS test in order to go to university or work abroad, and they need to get a certain score, usually 6.5 or 7, in order to make that happen. So, would you recommend that they just get the kind of minimum score that they need and then jump straight into an English speaking situation and deal with it?
I think if it depends on the personality of that person. If that person is a person who's hardworking and want to like, they're okay with adapting to the new environment, then I'd say just go for the university with the minimum level. But if you're still nervous about everything and you think that you still need more time to adapt to such environment, then maybe it'll be better to practice English more or take another course for like speaking or listening or reading so that you can improve your language.
And you also said that you speak Korean, is that right?
Yes.
Was that also
Um,
for university or?
I've studied from my university, but the reason I took Korean classes was because I really enjoy watching Korean dramas. And so I really want to be able to like see the dramas without the subtitles. And so that was kind of like my goal back then. So I took the class in university, but actually I found that it was like the right choice that I did that, because Korean and Japanese have like very similar things. Like the grammar is really similar, like nearly the same, like exactly, just like some few differences, but overall it's like the same grammar, and some vocabulary are the same as well. So I think I decided the decision I made back then was like the right choice of my life, really.
Right, excellent. And so you studied Korean when you were in a Japanese university.
Yes,
Wasn't that very
with Japanese
confusing?
students.
Wasn't that confusing? You're
Um,
still kind of perfecting your Japanese, and then you're also adding a new language at the same time?
I actually think that it's a very challenging thing to do, but I also feel it's like pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And so I feel like because I'm in the middle of all Japanese people, I have to work harder so that I can like accomplish what I want. So it's kind of like motivating to be in like an environment with like the native speakers and trying to learn a third language from my second language. I feel like get to learn both Japanese and Korean, so it was kind of like a great decision I think I've chosen in my life.
Because often when we're learning a new language, our immediate way of dealing with those new words is to translate them. So when you were learning Japanese, did you translate to English or Thai? And also when you were learning Korean, did you go back to Japanese or English or Thai? How did that work?
Um, for me, it's I think I'm quite different from most people, because when I try to learn a language, I don't try to translate them back to my own language, because I feel that it takes a lot of time. For example, when I speak in English, if I think of it in Thai first before saying it in English, it'll take so long that it's too long for conversation. So I feel like it's better to like remember it as like a language itself, not as Thai and then translate back and forth. It's like really time consuming. So for Japanese, I when I studied, of course I'd have to like translate things, but like when I try to speak, I try to think of it in Japanese or think in Korean instead of thinking it in like my first or second language.
Right. Okay, interesting. And are you doing that now with Chinese, you said? Is it Mandarin?
Yes. Yes, Mandarin. But
And so
I haven't taken any classes yet, but just like interested in it. But I actually have like a background of like the Chinese grammar and words since I was young. I'm actually my second language is English, but my third language should have been Chinese, not Japanese. But because back then I didn't have motivation in learning,
mm,
I feel that a language, if you learn a language, motivation is something that is really crucial in order to like become better in that language. Because for Chinese, I didn't like anything about China or anything about Chinese in particular. I was like really neutral. So learning the language was difficult itself, and trying to memorize even makes it worse. Like I just don't remember anything at all. So I I didn't have motivation back then, but now I also enjoy watching Chinese drama now, so that's why like now I have a new motivation.
that's so funny. I've never met anyone that undergoes learning a new language just to understand television.
It's actually something that I feel like it helps with my listening skills. Like when I was studying Japanese, before I know the words or before I even learn the grammar part, I actually know a lot of words through watching something in Japanese. Like I just automatically like learn few words or sentences, and then when I started learning Japanese, I was like, oh, I know this one, I know this one. So it's just like makes me feel like really comfortable in learning, and I don't feel like there's a lot of pressure or I have to remember this. I'm just like going with the flow and trying to like have fun in the learning the languages.
Yeah. And do you think that, for example, Netflix or television shows, do you think they're a really good way to learn languages?
Yes, I actually am learning English every day through Netflix. Like I'm a fan of like baking shows or cooking shows, and Netflix really has like a whole like world of that. Like they have lots of episodes and lots of like dramas or the cooking and baking shows in there. And when I watch these kind of shows, I usually put on like English subtitles so that I know how to spell some words, because they have like, when cooking or baking, they have specific words that they use in that kind of industry. So I get to learn a lot from them.
Like words like whisk, for example.
Yeah, whisk or like the saucepan, and I'm trying to think like gastronomy.
Gastronomy, right. Yeah, I can
Yeah, I really
imagine that's
had
a good
fun
word to see
watching
written because you hear
gastronomy.
it and you think, whoa, what on earth does that mean?
Yeah.
And do you keep a vocabulary book to kind of remember these words, or is it just go straight into the head?
I don't keep like a book because actually I'm like, it's kind of like different from like people would assume that I remember words fast or that I learn things quite fast, but I'm actually like a slow learner. It takes like a very long time for me to take something in, but because I watch a lot of like movies or dramas or something like shows, so I when I see these kind of things, like they repeat the words
Hmm.
frequently most of the time. So that's why like it just got into my head. But aside from that, if you're like trying to let me like learn something right now, I'll be like, what did you just say just now? I already forgot like 5 minutes ago. I just studied that and now I'm completely blank, something
Yeah.
like that. So I'm actually a slow learner, but just that I feel like if you want to be able to remember something, repetition is really important.
Some people say that we should see a word 7 times in different contexts in order to be able to
Really.
learn that word.
I think that's true.
Yeah. So, for example, it's great that you stick to a theme. So you go baking shows, and then you get to see words like gastronomy and whisk and saucepan 7 times because they're crucial words for that particular theme, like baking.
Yes.
Mm.
it's
So,
it's really fun. You get to know like new words, even if it's like not a vocabulary, but like I learned like fondant through like the baking shows. They use fondant to do cakes, or with the chocolate they use another thing, and it's kind of like it's new words every day from watching something.
and it's great. At the end of it, you probably become a lot better at baking as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, I mean, a lot of my viewers are particularly interested in learning or preparing for IELTS. But I think what your experience has really shown is that just get a really good level of a language, and then the high test scores come afterwards, right?
Yes, I think my tips would be like to be exposed in that language, use it every day, and just try to get yourself into that environment. Even if it's something normal like reading books or watching a movie, it's still like something that you can learn.
Okay, thank you very much, Miu. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I really had a great time.
And me too.